Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have some malicious compliance stories and our first story of the day is by Salva39, Uno Reverse Card Malicious Compliance. Welp, after lurking in the background for about 6 months, I finally decided to make my first post to Reddit. It's a rather benign one, where I am the victim of my own devices and the only damage was to my pride. A bit of context. In my country, we have 5 years of grade school, aka primary education, and 6 years of high school, secondary education. Not quite sure how that correlates to other countries, but there you are. During my schooling years, I was blessed with plenty of teachers who actually cared about students and their education, both academic and in values. Strict, demanding, but benevolent and nurturing. Some were brilliant in their own way. Like the chem teacher who the last week of our final year taught us how to use raisins, rum, and a wooden barrel to make a passable facsimile of whiskey. Despite being terrible at chem, I did learn that lesson. Or the ethics teacher who actually motivated us enough to dedicate half our Saturdays to alphabetize the less fortunate population of our local town, opening our eyes to the world around us and what needful really means, and then buying us beer as a reward. Again, final year, most of us were of legal drinking age and those who weren't were weeks away. Different times. There were indeed mean teachers, bad teachers, and phoning it in teachers, but from those I choose to take what I can use and ignore the rest. Paraphrasing my most beloved teacher, I have always been an annoying little crap, blowing off classes and then passing the tests, sometimes acing them, doing the bare minimum to pass except when the topic engaged me. When it did, here come the questions, the counterpoints, and general inquisitive jackbuttery. That was just a phase though, and it's bound to end any moment now, or so I keep telling my wife. So on to the story. Many moons ago when dragons roamed the earth, to be more precise, in the year of our Lord of 1991, I was enrolled in my 4th year of high school. 2 years before the beers and the rum, don't worry. The high school I was in had a dress code that bordered on criminal. Every day, boys were supposed to wear this horrible short-sleeved yellow shirt with green stripes around the arm openings and neck, black pants. Dudes and dudettes, black in a rainforest climate is no joke, with a black belt, yellow socks, and black shoes. Gym day was a little better, green t-shirt with yellow stripes and a gray band around the left arm, for pizzazz I guess. Yellow sweatpants with green lines down the legs, yellow socks, and white trainers. I think the principal had a thing for lemons and limes. I can find no other explanation. A teacher would stand at the door checking every student for violations and sending students home for non-compliance. So me being me, I tried to get sent home as often as possible for dress violations, as initially those didn't count as absences and I could claim my carefully cultivated and to this day nurtured legendary lack of memory as the reason. I could then spend the day reading, fishing, or swimming the local river, not a lot unlike Tom Sawyer. In this particular day, I decided to blow off school on the day of the end of quarter assembly, and I approached this by wearing socks of 2 different yellows. My left sock was almost neon and my right was a very muted yellow. To make it all the more obvious, I went with previous year's pants, a little tighter around the waist and crotch, but more importantly almost 2 inches short, showing plenty of sock. In hindsight, the pants should have been enough to get me sent home, but that fateful day, our prefect of discipline, Mr. Absalon, real name, had door duty. He is one of the good ones, always finding teachable moments. So I went by Mr. Absalon and to make sure he saw me, I bid him good morning. He greeted me back and smiled. What the heck? I was sure to be stopped and sent back, so I went back out and entered again very, very slowly, and joking around with schoolmates, calling attention to the idiot in the bright and muted yellow socks and short tight pants. He just waved me through. I went out a second time, and right before I reached him I bent down to tie my shoes, which were moccasins. He just laughed and said, "You know what? You're right. I'm letting you go through. Who knows? You might get an education today." In other words, I see your malicious compliance and I raise the stakes. How many cards? That in itself was awful. condemned to be all day in tight pants and stupid-looking yellow socks. Stupider looking anyway. But during the assembly, right before the principal made the opening remarks, Mr. Absalon took the microphone and announced that on assembly, we would have a special helper, assisting the speakers with speech notes, microphone, and water, and would dear Mr. OP please come up on stage to claim the role. Folks, I'm not a public person. I enjoy being anonymous and flying under the radar. That non-punishment was, in a word, brilliant and artfully applied. After the assembly, in which I conducted myself with as much dignity as can be commanded by one in pig-catching pants and 2 different socks, I was approached by Mr. Absalon. He just said, "I trust you will be more aware of your uniform in the future, yes?" Smiled and gave me a light slap on my shoulder. From that day, I made absolutely sure I could live with whatever I chose to wear, whether I was meant to be sent home or not. And that, as the pig said, is it, folks. Oh man, I definitely pity OP having to wear misfitting clothing and mismatching socks and whatnot. Sometimes you might be able to pull off the mismatching look as an actual look, but not so much when it's a neon yellow and a mute yellow together, and it's, well, supposed to be part of a uniform. I'm just having to think about walking around, sitting around all day with pants that are just too tight. And especially as a guy, that's no joyride, let me tell you. Let me ask you guys, were you the kind of kid that would skip school or try and find ways to get sent home? Me personally, I wasn't at all. I always went to school almost no matter what unless I was truly sick. Let me know about you guys in the comments down below. Our next story is by Jed292. Breaks are 15 and 25 minutes and when we say. So some context. I work in the machine shop fixing the tooling used in plastic injection molding, or at least I should. Half the time I'm on machines helping and making parts for maintenance because they're half a crew down, and the company won't hire anyone else since it seems to be going okay without them. You know, until the times it doesn't. Naturally, machines don't stay running just because it's my break, and machining jobs are often best done in blocks to prevent screw-ups, so it's rare that I'll ever get on break on time. I'm okay with this. My boss is okay with this. The unwritten agreement is the later I stay to help get production going, the later I can stay on break, assuming nothing else needs doing critically. So I put off my lunch by an extra half hour and 25 minutes becomes maybe 35 minutes. Of course, there's someone that has to ruin things. There always is. One day I go late for my first break and leave less than 5 minutes late. Next thing I know, I'm in a meeting being disciplined for taking too long of breaks. See, there are a few managers here that keep the whole place functioning, in spite of the rest of them. A guy that's been here more than a decade can run things perfectly and faster than anyone else? Fired for being on his phone while he waits for the machine to do its thing because he's so quick he outpaces it. That's the kind of management we deal with here. So I decide, no more long breaks? I have to take the breaks they specify? Sure. A month passes, production is through the floor, and downtime is huge waiting for mostly simple tool repairs. Get in there with screwdriver and pick out the jammed bit. See, it's said that if you can afford the setup cost, you'll struggle not to make a profit on plastic molding, as in $100 parts every few minutes. So half an hour of downtime here, another 40 minutes there while I wait for the operator to come back and test it because I went on break instead of doing the quick fix while they're here, it adds up. One of the managers decides to talk with me about this sudden downtime, and I mention how it worked before. Funny. Now, nobody mentions anything if I'm a bit laid back. This is the kind of thing that comes from the out-of-touch, lazy micromanagement type. The ones that only see that things aren't complying exactly the way it should be laid out, so they rigidly try and force it back to that structure, not realizing that it was out of whack, so to say, because of a very good reason. This next story is by Elemenope. Standardized testing, only read the directions. After seeing a bunch of testing posts from the student perspective, I thought I'd offer one from the teacher perspective. This incident is part of why I decided to teach preschool instead of working in public education. I was finishing my degree in early childhood education and had to spend a full year in a classroom. The first half of the year was spent observing and teaching with the classroom teacher still in the room. The second half was teaching on my own. This also meant that I had to administer the standardized test in the spring. I have always hated standardized tests from the first time I had to take one. I dislike them even more from a teacher point of view because they don't accurately measure anything. They take away the ability to teach fun and cool things because every lesson has to meet a standard, and they're stressful and, in my opinion, harmful to students. My biggest issue is the fact that all students are required to take the grade level test, regardless of their actual learning level. So I had students who were reading at a first grade reading level and were getting intervention to help them catch up, but they were expected to read the entire test by themselves and still score well. I hate how schools use these scores to define students. Some students are allowed waivers or special help during the test, but there are only a certain number allowed per school based on the number of students, and they are reserved for the most impaired students. The week before the test comes and I was literally handed a packet on what to review with my students for best test performance, along with the packet of information on how to administer the test. Essentially, I read the introduction of the test, demonstrate how to fill in the bubbles, encourage best guess, and a few other things. Once the test is started, the only thing I can do if students have questions is read the section instructions to them. There are no specifics on how the instructions are to be read. On the day of the test, as expected, some of my students who normally received extra help were struggling. They couldn't understand what they were reading well enough to know what to do. Math was especially difficult for one of my students, cue the malicious compliance. Because he struggled to read, the story problems were too difficult for him. He couldn't figure out enough of the words to set up the math problem. I wasn't allowed to read any part of the math problems for him. All I could do was read the section instructions, which read something to the effect of, read each problem carefully. Determine whether it requires addition or subtraction to solve the problem. Write the problem in the testing booklet and record your answer on the answer sheet. I don't recall the exact wording, but that was basically it. When he came to me for help, I repeated to him what I was supposed to say, telling him that I can't give any specific help, but I can read the instructions to him. Nowhere did it say that I had to read the instructions word for word, or that I couldn't leave any words out. So the first time he needed help, the problem required addition to solve. So I read the instructions. Read each problem carefully, determine whether it requires, slight pause, addition to solve the problem. The next time he needed help, I read the same, but omitted addition and emphasized subtraction. This didn't come close to giving him the support he should have been getting for this, but it at least gave him an idea of what to do. I wasn't going to let him completely fail because politicians have decided that a test score is more important than the student. My hat goes off to anybody that works in the early education sector, especially the ones like OP that legitimately care about the student's education and upbringing. Standardizing, packets, all that stuff. I hated that stuff in school, especially during your formative years. Having teachers that are passionate and enabled to have a creative teaching session, I think is way more valuable than having a packet thrown in front of you and, well, having to read and figure it out yourself. Having been removed from my schooling experience for a number of years now, I'm getting old, I don't think I can really remember any teacher that was focused on giving out packets, but I can remember teachers that were there to create a great experience and have creative teaching methods. I think the whole packet thing is just there to cover up for the bad teachers that just don't care. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.